The radio had been my grandfather's, an old Philco from the 1940s that still worked despite its age. After he passed, it was one of the few things I wanted from his estate. Not for its value, but for the memories of sitting in his living room, listening to baseball games and old music while he told stories about the good old days. I'd set it up in my apartment, more for nostalgia than practical use. My phone could stream anything I wanted to hear, but there was something comforting about the warm glow of the vacuum tubes and the gentle hum of the old electronics. It was during one of those late-night sessions, unable to sleep and idly turning the dial, that I first heard it. Between stations 107 and 107.9, in the static-filled gap where nothing should exist, I caught fragments of a voice, not the usual distant bleed-through from a faraway station, but something clear and distinct, speaking in what sounded like a news broadcast. The Johnson family remains missing after their home was found empty this morning. Police report no signs of struggle, but neighbors claim to have heard screaming around 3 a.m. I fine-tuned the dial, trying to lock onto the signal. The voice became clearer, but the content made my blood run cold. This marks the 15th disappearance in the Riverside district this month. Mayor Williams urges residents to remain indoors after dark and to report any unusual sounds or lights. Riverside was my neighborhood, but there had been no disappearances, no mayor's warnings. I would have heard about something like that. The broadcast continued with details about a town I recognized, but that didn't match my reality. Street names were the same, but the businesses were different. The mayor's name was right, but he died in office 3 years ago in my world. Then the reporter said something that made me drop the coffee mug I'd been holding. We're receiving reports that David Chen, local resident and freelance writer, was seen entering the restricted zone around midnight. If anyone has information about Mr. Chen's whereabouts. David Chen, that was my name. I fumbled for the dial, trying to find the station again, but it was gone. Only static filled the space between 107. For the rest of the night, I convinced myself it had been a prank broadcast, or maybe a radio drama I'd stumbled across. But as I walked to work the next morning, I found myself studying my neighborhood with new eyes, looking for the differences mentioned in the broadcast. The coffee shop on the corner was supposed to be a hardware store, according to the radio. The park where children played was described as a restricted zone where people disappeared. Everything looked normal, but the radio's words echoed in my mind. That evening, I returned to the frequency immediately. This time, the signal came in clearer, as if whatever barrier existed between realities was thinning. Day 3 of the search for David Chen. His landlord reports that his apartment appeared undisturbed, but several neighbors mention hearing his radio playing loudly throughout the night. Police are investigating whether the recent electronics anomalies are connected to the disappearances. Electronics anomaly. I looked at my grandfather's radio with growing unease. The broadcast continued, and I learned more about this other version of my town. The disappearances had started 6 months ago, always preceded by reports of strange radio transmission. People would be found in their homes, staring at radios or televisions that showed static, completely unresponsive to outside stimuli. Within days, they would vanish entirely. The phenomenon appears to be spreading, the reporter continued. Sarah Mitchell from the university's physics department theorizes that the missing individuals may be experiencing what she calls frequency displacement, essentially being pulled into parallel dimensions through electromagnetic resonance. My hands shook as I adjusted the dial. Dr. Mitchell was a real person, though in my world she taught English literature, not physics. Dr. Mitchell warns that anyone experiencing unusual radio or television reception should immediately power down their devices and contact authorities. The frequency between frequencies, she explains, may be acting as a bridge between realities, and prolonged exposure could result in dimensional drift. Dimensional drift. The term sent chills down my spine, but I couldn't stop listening. It was like watching a car accident. Horrifying, but impossible to look away from. Over the following weeks, I became obsessed with the broadcasts. Every night I'd tune in to learn more about this parallel world, where my town was slowly being consumed by mysterious disappearances. The reports grew increasingly desperate as more people vanished, always after being found in a trance-like state, staring at devices that shouldn't have been able to receive signals. I started keeping a journal, documenting the differences between my world and the one I was hearing about. In the radio world, the old movie theater had never been torn down. The mayor who died years ago was still alive but failing to contain a crisis that was spiraling out of control. And David Chen, the other me, was becoming the focus of the investigation. Week 4 of the David Chen investigation came one particularly chilling broadcast. Police have discovered that Chen had been documenting what he called cross-dimensional radio contact for months before his disappearance. His journal, found hidden in his apartment, describes detailed conversations with someone he believed to be himself from another reality. I nearly dropped the radio. Conversations? I'd never heard anyone respond to the broadcasts. Never been able to communicate back. According to the journal, Chen claimed to be receiving guidance from his other self about avoiding the disappearances. The journal's final entry, dated the night before his disappearance, reads, "He's going to try to switch places with me tonight. Says his world is safe. I don't think I have a choice anymore." The broadcast cut to static, leaving me alone with the implications. If the other me had been communicating with someone from another reality, and if that someone had convinced him to trade places. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, and for a moment, I swear I saw someone else looking back. Someone who looked like me but with eyes full of knowledge I didn't possess. The next night, the broadcasts changed. Instead of news reports, I heard something that made my blood freeze. "Hello, David." It was my own voice, but with subtle differences in intonation, as if someone was doing a nearly perfect impression of me. "I know you've been listening." I stared at the radio, afraid to respond, afraid to even breathe. "Don't be scared," my voice continued. "I'm you, or rather, I was you, before I figured out how to cross over. This isn't real," I whispered. But the radio picked up my voice somehow. "Oh, it's very real. I've been trapped in this world where everyone disappears, where the town is dying, where there's no future. But you live in a world where everything's normal, safe, boring, but safe." I reached for the power button, but my hand froze as the voice continued. "If you turn me off now, you'll never understand what's happening. The disappearances in my world, they're not random. People aren't just vanishing. They're being pulled through, one by one, to replace people in other realities. People who are smart enough to figure out how to escape." "Escape to where?" "To your world, David. To your life. I've been studying the frequency patterns for months, learning how to use the electromagnetic spectrum as a bridge. The radio isn't just receiving signals from my dimension. It's creating a connection." I looked at the old Philco with new horror. My grandfather's radio was modified, the other me confirmed. "Your grandfather understood things about reality that he never told you. Why do you think he left you that specific radio? He knew that someday you'd need to make a choice." "What choice?" "To let me come through. To trade places." I know my world sounds scary, but think about it. No bills, no mundane job, no boring routine. Just adventure, discovery, the thrill of survival. And the people who disappear, they find better lives in other realities. It's not death, David. It's relocation." Something in the tone made me doubt this explanation. "What aren't you telling me?" Static filled the air for a long moment before my voice returned. Tighter now, more desperate. "My world is collapsing. The disappearances aren't people moving to better realities. They're being consumed by the void between dimensions. The frequency bridges are breaking down reality itself, and I'm the only one left who understands what's happening." The truth hit me like a physical blow. "You're not trying to save me. You're trying to escape a dying universe. Wouldn't you?" my voice pleaded. "If you saw your entire reality crumbling, everyone you'd ever known consumed by nothingness, wouldn't you do anything to survive?" I would. The horrible truth was that I absolutely would. "The process has already begun," the other me continued. "Every night you listen, our realities become more connected. Soon the bridge will be strong enough for me to cross over. All you have to do is not resist. I felt a tugging sensation, as if something was trying to pull me into the radio itself. The room began to blur around the edges, and I could see flashes of another place. A town that looked like mine but wrong, empty, with dark windows and streets that seemed to extend into infinity. Just let go, my voice coaxed. Let me take your place. You'll be safe in my world, and I'll be safe in yours. But I could see the lie now. There was no safety in a collapsing reality. I would arrive just in time to be consumed by the void that was devouring everything. With enormous effort, I lunged for the radio's power cord and yanked it from the wall. The tugging sensation stopped immediately, and the room snapped back into focus. Silence. I spent the rest of the night researching electromagnetic theory, dimensional physics, anything that might explain what I'd experienced. Most of it was beyond my understanding, but I found enough to confirm my worst fears. The frequency between stations wasn't empty. It was a gap in reality itself. A space where the barriers between dimensions grew thin, and my grandfather's radio, with whatever modifications he'd made, was designed to access that gap. I found his journals the next day, hidden in the basement of his old house. Page after page of calculations, diagrams of radio circuits, and observations about frequency bridges and dimensional bleed-through. The final entry, dated just before his death, was a warning. The radio must never be left on overnight. The other side grows stronger with each connection. I've heard my own voice calling to me, promising escape from this world's troubles. But I've seen what happens to those who answer. There are things in the spaces between realities that are far worse than loneliness, or boredom, or even death. Some doors should never be opened, no matter how tempting the voice on the other side might sound. I destroyed the radio that afternoon, taking a sledgehammer to it until nothing remained but scattered components and broken tubes. But even as I swept up the pieces, I wondered if it was too late, because sometimes late at night, when the world is quiet, I still hear my voice calling from the static between stations, and every time I hear it, the temptation grows a little stronger. The frequency between stations is never truly empty. There's always something listening, something waiting for you to tune in and discover that sometimes the most dangerous voice you can hear is your own.